Richard Hoffman has published 4 previous books of poetry: Without Paradise, Gold Star Road, winner of the Barrel Street Press Poetry Prize and the Sheila Martin Book Award; Emblem and Noon Until Night, which received the 2018 Massachusetts Book Award for poetry. His other books include the celebrated memoirs Half the House and Love and Fury, the story collection Interference and Other Stories, and the essay collection Remembering the Alchemist and Other Essays. Richard is emeritus writer in residence at Emerson College and nonfiction editor of Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices. Eileen Cleary is the author of Child Ward of the Commonwealth, which received an honorable mention for the Sheila Martin Book Prize. He's just an amazing guy. I mean, he just does, I could just keep reading stuff he's done for an hour, and people would say, hey man, it's getting dark, I gotta catch a bus. But aside from all that, Richard Hoffman, it's a delight to have you here. Please welcome him.
Thanks, everyone. This has been just, the readings were wonderful. Just wonderful. And depending on the time of day and how much strain I put on my eyes, I change from one pair to another until I find the right one. These, by the way, are progressive lenses. It's good to look through progressive lenses.
Yes.
But please, if we are talking and you notice me going like this, please understand I'm not checking you out, looking you up and down. I'm just trying to bring you into focus. I had more than one moment of panic trying to come up with something to say to you before I realized that I was trying too hard. We know this as writers, I know that problem. I was proceeding as if I was supposed to know what needs to be said and panicked that I didn't and don't. I'm so full of shit that I think I'm supposed to come up with some kind of answer, when all I can really do is pose questions. Maybe I'll make a suggestion or two before my talk is over. Anyway, back before I got my new eyewear, prepping for today, I went online and had a look at the account of your annual meeting last year. And I read about it being the return to meeting in person. But I misread it. For a brief moment, I thought it said in prison. Orwell said to see what's in front of one's nose needs a constant struggle, but I don't think that's what he meant. Anyway, that's no joke. Writers in prison. Some years ago, I served as chair of PEN New England, and my eyes were open to the situation of writers around the world. Poets, playwrights, journalists, satirists, especially satirists like Maung Dura of Myanmar, known as Zargana, a comedian along the lines of Jon Stewart or John Oliver. Or Nur Mohammed Yassin, a Uyghur writer who remains in prison since February 2005 on charges of inciting separatism for his story, The Wild Pigeon, an allegory about the son of a pigeon king trapped and caged while on a mission to find a new home for his flock. Or Ashraf Fayyad, a poet charged with apostasy by the Saudi government and sentenced to death. His sentence later commuted to only 8 years and 800 lashes. And then there are the extrajudicial killings of writers like Russian journalist Anna Politkovskaya, Cambodian writer Kem Lay, and more recently Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi national but an American journalist. And then just this past weekend, the body of Mexican journalist Alejandro Gallegos, who ran the news site La Voz del Pueblo, or the Voice of the People, was found in Tabasco. Hashem Shiabani, a poet and founder of a library and community center in southern Iran, was executed by the theocracy for Moharebe, or waging war on God. That is, for writing in Arabic, the language of the minority in the south of Iran. I wrote this poem for him. I think all you need to know going into it is that Hamasine is a wind that blows out of Africa. For a slain poet, in memoriam, Hashem Shalani. Your killers drew the zipper across the black bag like the sign friends made across their mouths when you opened yours in the wrong company and carried you out of there. Kings, we all know, build palaces, hoard riches, gather armies of impoverished and fierce young men, and make war. But a king who will kill a poet out of fear, there is no evil on earth he will not do. You, however, who have reminded us of the truth of the lovers we are, you are already in paradise, where solely for your pleasure, the one God has bestowed upon you 72 blank pages and your favorite pen, along with a whole new alphabet made from the shadows of birds in flight, the flash of ripples on the lake in sunlight, letters in the shapes of the many intersecting shadows of the grass, and the sheen of blown sand sheared from the crest of a shifting dune by the Hamasine, marks to represent the sound of weeping, signs for the sound of laughter, but nothing too clear, none of them just right, nowhere the once and for all expression that would obliterate desire. If I thought what you wanted was rest, if any of your poems could be so construed, I would wish you rest. The pen Writers at Risk directory of those of us around the world, detained, imprisoned, killed, or disappeared for their writing, runs to 140 pages. And it includes poets, journalists, novelists, podcasters, and other witnesses and commentators deemed dangerous by one government of thugs or another. It's worth pointing out that in many cases, writers have been assassinated by extremists after their government has put a target on them by calling them traitors and enemies of the people. Thinking about these writers that paid such a high price suggests to me that truth-telling, the fancy term is parrhesia, is a sacred duty. Parrhesia can be defined as speaking truth to power, yes, but it also has the sense of an obligation to speak truth to power. It doesn't matter whether you're a poet, novelist, essayist, memoirist, playwright, podcaster, or comedian. What Camus said holds true for all of us who write. Whatever our personal weaknesses may be, he wrote, the nobility of our craft will always be rooted in two commitments difficult to maintain: the refusal to lie about what one knows, and the resistance to oppression. So here's a truly hard question. We are, at least so far, protected by our Constitution, which reads, it's good to hear this aloud from time to time. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So the question, what excuse do we have for not speaking out? Does the tradition of free expression count for anything? Does the First Amendment really protect us? More importantly now, do we believe that it does and that it will continue to do so? Or have we timidly made a secret deal? Secret most of the time even from ourselves, to pipe down, to compromise, to steer around certain things we know to be true. We live, after all, in a country that rests squarely on a mountain of lies about a greater genocide than the Nazis ever dreamed of. and the truth that the institutions of our society were largely financed by treating human beings as livestock may soon be forbidden. History recast as wokeism. Everywhere, people are encouraged to remain ignorant of the truth, or at least talk about and write about something else, anything else. How is it that we consent to our own marginalization? And have we thereby betrayed our fellow citizens of the Republic of Letters, both those I've mentioned and those who continue to face, even now, far worse consequences than we? Recently, I watched a video of former Secretary of State Antony Blinken's farewell press conference. 2 American journalists were forcibly removed, one after the other, for asking pointed questions about the slaughter in Gaza. First Max Blumenthal, and then Sam Husseini. People saw Husseini yelling, "Get your hands off me, you're hurting me. Answer my question. Why won't you answer my question?" He was lifted from his chair and carried out by uniformed officers. But can I tell you what I found more striking and much more demoralizing? The silence, the acquiescence, the obedience of nearly 100 other journalists in the room, craning their necks to look, and then turning face front to hear the carefully curated official narrative rolled out one last time. Am I the only one here who sees that as a sin against Parisia, a betrayal of our fellow writers, and a terrifying glimpse of the future given where we are now? My point is that we need one another now. This was great to walk in and see this word. It was really great, really important. We're facing a tsunami of untruth, joined to megalomania and unrestrained cruelty. There's a meme going around, you may have seen it. First they came for the journalists. We don't know what happened after that. Clever and chilling. But we do know what happened after that, because we know what always happens after that. Nearly 500 journalists have been killed in Gaza in the past year, trying to get the world to pay attention to the slaughter there. It's disheartening. I used to believe there was a way to document atrocity that would wake outrage, and that it was an artist's most essential purpose to do so. That the alternative was to compose new tunes for Nero's fiddle, or paint a ceiling for some pope or another. But if that was ever so, that art could wake outrage and stir populations to action, doesn't seem to be the case here anymore. And I find that at least as horrifying as the torrent of images of shredded children pouring out of Gaza, because it ensures that such carnage will continue there and elsewhere. Are we so deeply compromised that we can't act? We dare not act? Has history so inured us to the cries of other human beings that we're numb? Is there a callus grown over our conscience? I mean, it is discouraging. Why go on? Why write? Why paint? Why paint the slaughter of the innocents, or Goya's war series, or Guernica, if nobody gives a damn? It's said that when Alexander II read the novelist Ivan Turgenev's A Sportsman's Notebook, he wrote to its author saying, "Sir, you have made me weep." And within weeks he emancipated Russia's serfs, whose oppression Turgenev had so compellingly portrayed. Now Turgenev would likely be ignored, or he might be given a prize, maybe. He'd be celebrated while the atrocities he documented continue. I'm circling around something that's hard to name here. I suppose one word for it is cynicism. Another is surrender. I'm doing my best to resist that. I suppose I'm asking us all to confront our own disempowerment and ask where it comes from. I'm also trying to catch myself self-censoring, to stop gaslighting myself, to stop half-consciously sequestering certain things I know to be true, and to instead find a way to live and write with my whole self, with all I know, whether in a poem or story or essay or memoir, or even maybe in a keynote address. The reason tyrants fear poets, storytellers, journalists, is because we are first and foremost citizens of the Republic of Letters, a commonwealth that issues no passports because it transcends borders and boundaries. There are no citizenship papers. Instead, there are pages and pages to fill, witness to bear, questions to ask, a whole life's worth. Tyrants throw tantrums when they understand that our first loyalty is solidarity. Our loyalty is to our fellow writers, our colleagues around the world in search of the truth. And what is that? The truth. How does one find it? That question brings me around to my title today, and here I have to make a quick confession. Charles asked me for the title of the talk before I'd written it. Always dangerous. So I figured out how to wrench myself back to what I promised, take out the lies. That's inspired by the late, great Grace Paley, who advised write and write and write and write, then take out all the lies. It's not so easy as you might think, she said, taking out the lies. I thought I'd have more to say about that treasured advice, but it would be pedantic to list all the types and degrees of lies, from whoppers to fibs, the malicious to the merely incorrect, omissions, deliberate or not. The search for the lies to take out begins with an examination of the words themselves. Some were always dishonest. Others have been worn thin by history. Still others are stealth advertisements for a poisonous and predatory worldview. Orwell said it all in Politics in the English Language, and I'll bet each of us can find plenty of contemporary examples of the things he points out there. But Paley's warning, it's not as easy as you might think, taking out the lies. Oh man, that's the hard work. To not only resolve not to repeat the lies we are offered, but to identify and take out the ones we discover we're telling ourselves. As Isaac Dinesen once wrote, the truth is seldom beautiful, but the search for it always will be. That truth is not a perfect abstraction called the truth, but the refusal and removal of lies, of comforting untruths, of unquestioned assumptions and biases. For all of us, the work of parrhesia begins with becoming aware of what we have accommodated incrementally and only half-consciously. I want to recommend a book to you. Sebastian Haffner's memoir, Defying Hitler. In it, he recalls clearly, in hindsight, how Nazism took hold in Germany while he was growing up. Written just after World War II, the book is a revelation and chilling in its parallels to the present. One of the things Haffner remarks upon several times is how, as Hitler rose to power, he was seen as a clown, a vulgar narcissist who could not be taken seriously, who certainly would not last. Over and over, people refused to believe that the worst would come to pass. And when the apoplectic bullies spoke of annihilating the Jewish race, it was taken for hyperbole. It's been said that journalism is the first draft of history. But whatever our genre, as writers, we're historians. Like Haffner, we're representatives of our time who insist that history is not a narrative edited and maintained by the powerful, by princes and prime ministers, and most definitely not by corporations and their PR firms. The Czech novelist Milan Kundera wrote that the struggle of the people against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. We are the ones writing the stories, the poems, the essays that will stand as witness and as counterweight to the propaganda that will be fed to our children and grandchildren. This is no time to play it safe. Shit just got real. The promised deportations have begun. The purges of civil servants, the vindictive attacks on political opponents, the battle over books, over curricula, over descriptions of reality has begun, and its effects will shape the future. Remember that the Hitler Youth of the 1930s became the SS of the following decade. The Red Brigades were indoctrinated school children, set loose as young adults to wreak the murderous havoc of the Cultural Revolution in China. We need solidarity like never before. I hear writers saying, well, we'll get through this, echoing the voices of Hafner's neighbors in Germany. But we're fast approaching the point at which the only way to get through this is compliance. The only way to get through this is to violate the first of Camus' two commitments that grant our work its nobility: the refusal to lie about what one knows. And silence now is also a lie. I once heard the great Nigerian writer Wole Soyinka on a panel at Brown University, speaking of his exile and of the murder of his friend and colleague, the writer Ken Saro-Wiwa, by the Nigerian regime. I'll never forget what he said that day, and I pass it along to you. A young writer in the auditorium asked him what we could do here in America as writers with the kind of privilege not enjoyed in many other parts of the world. Soyinka paused a moment and then said, I think that when you wake up in the morning, you should ask yourself, honestly, what could I write today that would really get me in trouble? I want to finish with a poem I wrote some years ago that speaks to the practice of parrhesia. I mean it as encouragement, a kind of pep talk. It begins with an epigraph from the Greek tragic poet Aeschylus, from his play Agamemnon, which begins with these words from a messenger who's just run onto the stage. The house itself, if it had a voice, would speak out clearly. As for me, I speak to those who understand. If they fail, memories are nothing. The poem is called Messengers. We say what we know because we must. You can cheer us or run us out of town. It's nothing at first, like rain on dust, a hairline crack in the fault line's crust, a tentative first-person plural pronoun. We say what we know because we must recall, recount, redeem, and readjust all that we've known, not for a noun. It's nothing at first, like rain on dust, or the first few tiny flecks of rust on barrels buried underground. We say what we know because we must talk back to histories we do not trust, relearn our own, and set them down. It's nothing at first, like rain on dust. What does it mean to fear what's just? You can cheer us or run us out of town. We say what we know because we must. It's nothing at first, like rain on dust. Thank you for your attention and for having me here.